Welcome back to another episode of Honesty Talk. Now, we have had 3 seasons, mashallah, loads of episodes, loads of different topics, but there's one kind of common factor between all of them, and that is communication. Now, if you think about divorce, for example, you need to effectively communicate with your spouse as to what's kind of going on for you, what's going wrong in the marriage, asking for your needs. When we think about the episode on self-love, it's communication with oneself. When it comes to intimacy, telling your partner what you need, what you like. So communication is very, very important in life, in all settings, between all people. Communication probably runs smoothly when vibes are happening and people are happy and joyous occasions. But when there's conflict, when there's stress, when people are hit with tests, when emotional, mental, spiritual kind of stability and coherence is out of the window, communication tends to suffer. Egos show up, wounds show up. There's a manifestation of unresolved stuff. And that destroys relationships, right? So we want to talk about healthy communication and what we can do when these things happen to try to move ourselves towards emotional intelligence, emotional maturity, and therefore healthy communication. So, LaYinka, I shall start with you, inshallah.
So when I think of communication, when I've taught about communication, it is something that happens between at least 2 people, right? And what most people don't realize is that we are, number one, communicating all the time, even when we're silent. So we're communicating with our body language, with our eyes, with that tense, jaw or whatever. So we're always communicating something. That's the first thing. But also that our communication is always a response to someone else's, what they have communicated. And we are only communicating based on our interpretation. So if you suddenly, Sumayah, if you suddenly frowned, I'm going to respond to what I've decided that frown means. Yeah. She's mad at me. She thinks there's something in my eye, right? And I'm going to communicate based on what I think, but not based on actually your frown. And I think this is a thing that obviously most people don't know, but just thinking when we are communicating, it's actually all about what's going on inside us, not what's going on outside of us, even though we want to believe it's because the kids just broke my fine china, right? It's because it's your fine china, right? And you're freaking out about that. But it's so, subhanAllah, when healthy communication, when communication breaks down, it's such a source of turmoil within yourself, because you've got this story going on, like internal chatter and all of that, but also that energy that it causes, that friction it causes between the people that you are communicating with. And I think for us, I hear a lot of people saying, how do I get my husband to communicate effectively? Or how do I get my children to? But not actually thinking about working on how we choose to communicate in all the realms that we communicate, verbally and non-verbally. So I always say, start with yourself. That's what I just focus on yourself first and how you are or not communicating with other people around you.
What are your thoughts, Sumayah?
I liked what you mentioned about meaning, like how we attach meaning. That means this, and so I'm responding accordingly. And it makes me think about the importance of kind of tuning into the stories that are being told. And we naturally make up stories. It's our job to make up stories about what people intend, what they're communicating to us, where it's coming from. You know, we create this whole thing in our mind and we respond accordingly, like you said. But the part of effective communication then, by definition, is to get it right. And I won't know what you mean or what I meant by the frown unless you ask,
Yes.
you know, and that's sometimes hard to do, especially if you're already defensive because of the meaning. So what Aliyah said in the beginning, that our egos come up, our wounds come up, but okay, I don't want to open the conversation with her because I don't want to get into an argument. We have this whole thing. So it makes asking even harder. But really the short kind of way to deal with it is to have the conversation. What did you mean by that? What was going on for you when that happened?
And even sometimes reflecting it back. So what I heard you say was, and then that person can actually correct you if what you had interpreted and what you had heard is correct or otherwise, right? So what I heard you say was X, Y, Z, and the person say, well, actually, that's not what I said. I said A, B, C. And then what you had interpreted and what you had heard is now being edited. You know, you're now being corrected, and now you can respond from the correct meaning and what the person meant, rather than the meaning that you had created in your head.
So clarification is important.
Yes.
Clarification is very, very important. I think at the same time, we need to be consciously aware of how we are communicating, because we are in control of what we say, of our body language and how we say it, the timing of what we say, and that can have an effect on the other person. So I think there's a number of things that we're all saying here, that it's looking at yourself, looking inwardly at how you're communicating, seeking clarification from the other person. If you're kind of coming up with a story as to why and how and what they said and what that means. And also looking inwardly at the communication that you're having with yourself as to what that communication means. And to basically, I think what we're saying here is ask questions. Ask questions, right?
For sure.
Ask questions. And I think it's also important, you touched upon it, that communication is not just what we say. It's a person's facial expressions. It's their body language. It's them, turning their back, or, speaking about something else when you're talking about something. It's everything. And so effective communication, in my opinion, is very much, and we see this in the Prophet ﷺ, that when he used to speak to people, he would turn himself. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He would turn himself. He would give of himself in body, in word, to that person. And what does that do? Like if I'm talking to you, like, and I'm just kind of like, and I'm just, how would that make you feel? But when I turn to you, and you can see my body is facing yours,
all of you.
You've got all of me, baby. Yeah.
That was not.
But how does that make you feel?
Yeah, it makes me feel important. It makes me feel like I've been seen and heard. It makes me feel like I matter. And you're giving me that attention. It makes me feel like,
It makes you feel seen and heard. It makes you feel that you matter. And what I've just done there is I've just repeated some of the key words that you said. And automatically you were like, yeah, and you're nodding.
See that, guys?
NLP.
And you're nodding because that makes you, just by simply repeating a few words that you used, it makes you feel that actually, she's actually hearing me. And so
it's so powerful.
It's very, very powerful. So a few shifts in our body language, in the way that we speak, in the words that we use, can have a completely different impact, a different result on whatever is going on. And that can be used at a time of conflict. The thing is, if we think about it, at a time of conflict, we have to ask ourselves another question. Who is speaking? who is speaking, who is sitting.
So I want you to explain that for the people, because people are like, what
It's
have we got
you.
multiple personalities?
It's you, yeah.
So what I mean by that is that as an individual, we have our ego, we have a wounded inner child, we have several parts of us. So we might have the part that's defensive because of something that we went through as a child. We might have the part that's been neglected. And so any type of rejection, any type of abandonment, that wounded part of us speaks up. We've got a part that wants to protect us. We have a part that is rooting for us, that's confident. And so in different circumstances, in different settings, these parts speak up. And so it's important to kind of take a step back. And this requires time and training to say, who is speaking up here? Mm-hmm. Is it my inner child who is terrified of being rejected again? Is it my loving adult? Is it the creative side of me? Is it the wounded side of me? And respond accordingly, because in times of stress and conflict, often it's not the rational, loving adult self.
Nope.
There are tantrums that are manifesting from the inner child. There's pain, there's hurt. And so it's important to identify, but the only way that we can do that is when we are spending more time with ourselves, is when we know ourselves, is when we know all of these parts of ourselves and where they emanate from, where their origin is from. So
it does require some work to be able to get to that point where you can recognize and understanding yourself and knowing yourself, to get to the point where you can recognize where all of those parts are coming from. As we were being speaking about communication, one thing that comes up for me as I'm thinking about it is some things that I've heard from clients that I've worked with in the past with regards to breakdown in communication. And I remember someone had a breakdown in communication with her spouse, and I said to her, how do you guys tend to communicate? And she said, it's always like via text. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, that is surefire. That's a surefire way for all communication to break down, mainly because it's just words. And words, you don't hear what someone's saying. Those emails that you've read and you're like, what the heck? How could she say that? Or those text messages or those posts on Facebook or Instagram, whatever, those comments, and you respond in a certain way because you can't hear. There's no nuance of the tone, the pace, nothing. So you lose all forms of understanding and meaning from just text. And so anyone who tends to text their whoever, anyone they have a relationship, and you're always like having back and forth, quit that. Send voice notes, because at least then you can hear what the person has said, how they have said it, because the how matters. Just like you can say what in so many different ways. What? What? Right? And all I've done is change the tone.
Yeah.
And the tone itself has changed the meaning and how you respond to it. So, you shout it to your child, and I've learned this with my teens, because when I shift my tone, their response to me is completely different.
Even when the volume.
Yeah, my kids get scared when I say that again. Say that again. Nope, no, mom.
You can shout.
Please shout.
Yeah, it's these shifts. It's these shifts in communication. It's these shifts in body language that make a huge difference, and it's an invitation to us all to read up about communication, to study. We need to study communication, right? Because it can save us from a lot of trouble. And also, I think studying it is one thing, but really kind of doing our healing work, because often it's our unresolved mess that ends up communicating in a certain situation. So I think doing our healing work, learning about effective communication can have a wonderful result in our relationships. What do you think, Sumayah?
What you were saying a little while before about asking yourself who is speaking. and you were referring to when I'm speaking, I'm internally asking who's speaking. I think to add to that, that when I'm listening to the person in front of me, I'm also asking who are they coming to me as, and how are they coming to me? Because, you know, there's one thing to recognize that this person is speaking to me from a place of anger, or, you know, what I'm receiving, but also, you know, having that compassion for them. It doesn't mean that you should excuse someone being abusive or abrasive or anything like that, but you can also look at them and say, okay, I can see they're in a great deal of pain, and maybe that their response is because of something that they're going through. And from that position, I'm not stuck in feeling defensive that you shouted in my face, but I'm able to see that you're hurting right now, and feel a sense of compassion for you. And that's, again, hard to do in conflict because we're reacting, we're bouncing off of each other. But when I can see, okay, you know, we're clearly hurt. And one of the things that's really important, and you spoke about doing your work, but learning to call a time out and pause. You know, part of communication is also saying, okay, I'm not ready to have this conversation. We need to shelf this and come back when both of us are more centered.
And communicating that.
Yeah, just say it right then.
Because the danger is that some people will want to take time out, and you know, you've just had a conflict. They want to take time out for you know, it's a good reason, you know, because they value the relationship, they want to take time out, but then not articulating that, not communicating that to the other person, can then cause further problems, because then that person thinks, well, you know what, they don't give a damn.
Yeah,
they don't care. You know, I shared my pain with you, and you're off. And you're just like pretending like nothing's happened.
You've abandoned the...
Right? But then when a person communicates that they want to take time out, then the other person realizes, you know what? This person cares about me. They care about this relationship enough that they've told me that, you know what? I need to take time out in order to collect myself, and I'll come back to you.
Yeah, like this conversation is getting unhealthy. And I think the distinction between what you're saying, so shutting down, storming out, walking out the room, switching off your data or your phone, like that is not shelving the conversation. That's a coping mechanism. Maybe you're overwhelmed or what, that's different. But actually saying, listen, I think this is not healthy. This is not productive.
That's the key.
So we need to stop. Yeah,
saying
it. It is. Yeah.
And not assuming that the person knows.
Yeah, that you meant.
Assuming that the person knows that, you know, that this is how I deal with this. You know that, you know this is how I am. But respecting, honoring that person enough to say, look, just give me a 5. Yeah. I'm not ditching this conversation. We are going to get back to working on this. But what's going on for me right now is, and I just need time to process, to think about what you've just said, to cry, whatever it might be, but to communicate. And I think that is a way to foster connection and foster love, because I can see that person, okay, they haven't abandoned me in this conversation. They do value what we have, and I'm gonna just hold space for them in that way and let them do what they need to do. And this is gonna be resumed.
And when you take a break, I think, and this is you guys, is this therapies, the unconditional positive regard. Like I'm gonna judge your intent. So now I've taken time out and I'm simmering. What did you mean by that? You know, I thought we were, you know, not hitting below the belt, but you did say, I did entrust you with that being a weakness, and you know, you used it against me, or you threw it in my, and you're processing this, but thinking, okay, they were probably doing the best they can. They probably came at me because something I said really cut. Like this is, because if you go inward and sit down with what happened, and you feel like this person is coming after, they're trying to kill you, like they're coming after you, then it makes it hard to come back to the table without like coming in swinging. If you think that they're coming for you. So okay, yes, this person has proven to me time and time again that we have this trust, we have a friendship. I know that they care about me. I know they wish well for me and they love me. There must be something. I'm expecting an explanation from them that I'm willing to even hear or accept, you know, because that foundation is there. Because if I come back feeling that, you know, they're coming for me, I'm just rolling up my sleeves and coming in to fight.
Yeah.
I think it's remembering. I think you hit upon an important point, that it's, and this goes back to husna dhan, good thoughts, that you, in a moment of conflict, particularly when you're close with someone, you can find yourself so hurt by what they said or how they said it, but it's important to go back and to remember that this actually is it's a beautiful relationship. It's a relationship that where there was mutual love and mutual care and mutual support, and and to remember that, and to realize that is weightier than the conflict that's kind of just happened. But what happens when there's just like intentional, really, really, really bad communication? We're not talking about just something that just happened, misunderstanding, or in the moment, or someone's ego or wounds showing up. But we're talking about constant, like negative, ineffective, painful communication.
That's the toxic relationships episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, it needs a timeout, and it needs a stepping back. And in that, are you referring to what happens if the communication is from someone else, and they're like bombarding me with their mess? Is that what you're saying? Is that the question?
Basically, when there's just constant conflict, there's just constant disagreement, no one's hearing each other, it's ego versus ego, what do you do?
First of all, just be quiet. just end it, because it's clearly not going anywhere. It's creating more wounds in each other, and you're not actually getting anything out of it, right? So I would say, first of all, just be quiet. Zip, step back, go take a walk. Just remove yourself from that situation, at least, to give yourself space, to give yourself room. Yes, you might go into that place of starting overthinking it, and he said, she said, la la la. But at least you're out. First of all, just you're out of that space. I like, I'm hippie, so I like to breathe. Just take some breaths. Some deep belly breaths. Right? So that creates space. And then what I like to say is, right now, what do I want and what do I need? What do I want for myself? Not even necessarily for the situation, right? What do I want for myself that I can give myself? Not necessarily what do I want and they must do X, Y, Z, because you don't have control over that. So what do I want and what do I need, again, from myself? So is it from myself, I just need to say, I'm okay? Is it from myself, I need to give myself some hugs? What do I want and what do I need from myself right now? Because that's a form of self-parenting and reparenting possibly that inner child that's like having a tantrum, and just saying, do you know what, you're okay, I see you, you're mad, that triggered some hella wounds out there, but you know what, it's cool. I'm here, you're safe, we're out of danger, it's fine. And moving from a place of then knowing what you want and what you need, thinking then back to the communication in the relationship or whatever it might be, what do I want in this? I want to tell him or her X, Y, Z, and communicate this need to them like this. And I know it sounds like really slow-mo,
But it needs to be.
But that's what comes about from slowing down. We need to learn to slow down, because everything we're like this needs to happen, and arguments are like this, and conflict is like this, and it's never in slow motion.
And
you never see the pan going across the room in slow mo. And it's for us to do the slowing down, because we've got control. I think we fail to remember that we've got control. We feel like that is controlling me, the emotion is controlling me. Rein it back. Take back those reins and decide how you want to use them next.
I also think that something that I don't know, I haven't seen spoken about in terms of effective communication. But when I think back to the history of Muslims and how the Prophet ﷺ, how he communicated, how the Sahaba communicated, I think we miss out on a very, very important point, and that is the more you are communicating with Allah, the better your communication will be with the creation. The more dhikr you're doing, the more your tongue is moist with the dhikr of Allah, with the remembrance of Allah, the more careful, because your tongue has been moving, it's been moving in something as beautiful as remembering, as praising, as thanking the Lord of everything. Then you're going to be, your tongue is automatically going to be it's going to be more careful with what it says. The more you're speaking to Allah, you're having a dialogue with your Lord, that's going to be at the forefront of your mind. Okay, Allah is seeing me. Allah is observing me. So I think a part of effective communication is to communicate more with Allah Himself through dhikr, through gratitude, through praise, through recital of the Quran, through dua, through asking of Him, through even in the middle of a conversation, speaking to Him. Ya Allah, like this person's coming for me. Ya Allah, help me. I don't like the way this person has spoken to me.
Even a simple bismillah.
Right? Even a simple bismillah. That communication that's attached to the Creator will change the communication with the creation.
And I think it puts people in context. Like it's the subhanallah, Allah Azza wa Jal has the perfection, but we as everyone else is going to fall short. Like you see people as servants of Allah, there's compassion for them. And like I'm dealing with someone else's heart and they're dealing with my heart. We're all fragile. We're all vulnerable, and you're like this idea of like curating beautiful hearts in our friendships and our relationships. And we're trying to protect each other's hearts in what's going on. Even though I'm hurt, you're hurt, and we're trying to just be with each other. This is a beautiful soul, and I love her.
Whew.
Oh boy.
Yes. So, final kind of practical tips to establish healthy, effective communications. May I start with you?
What you said about slowing things down. Our thoughts go very fast. The interactions go very fast. Don't be afraid to ask for time and try to slow things down, especially if you have that I'm gonna stop, like you think I'm gonna, if you really feel it, then maybe you do need to censor and revise, because once it comes out, you can't take it back.
Yeah.
But then once it comes out, effective communication can patch that up as well.
Yeah, you can always go back.
So it's never, we should never despair that, okay, it's come out and it's, no, you can always change things around. A kind word, a gesture, a touch of a hand, it can change what came before, right? LaYinka?
Just briefly, I know that we haven't really spoken much about our communication with ourselves, but that's as important as communication with other people, because we are communicating with ourselves all the time, and we are with ourselves all the time, and so we have those thoughts that are running in our mind that most people are oblivious to. Actually, it's always interesting to me to hear people when I say, so what were you thinking at that time? Like, I wasn't thinking anything. Yeah, you were. But you weren't in tune with what you were thinking. So if you allow yourself to go back there and get curious, what were you thinking? You're like, oh, I was thinking this.
What were you telling yourself?
And that's why you responded like that. And so to become aware of our internal dialogue, that's why journaling is beautiful, because you create a space of meeting yourself, right? And you become more attuned to yourself and your thoughts and your feelings. But establishing a healthier communication with oneself is just as important. Telling yourself you're amazing. And it's not just like positive affirmations out here. You need to positively affirm here who you are and how Allah created you to be.
SubhanAllah, I like that. I think for me, just quite practically, do your healing work. Read up, study, learn about effective communication, and make a commitment to get better, to communicate better. We all have room for improvement. It's not a case of, okay, that's a bad communicator and that's a good communicator and I'm the victim and you're the perpetrator. No. We all can communicate better. To learn about it, to study it, and ultimately to ask Allah to give us good tongues, to enable us to be the best communicators in our marriages, in our friendships, in our roles at work, in motherhood, because we may not know what needs to be fine-tuned, but He does.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the communication episode. We look forward to hearing from you, and we'll see you over at the next episode of Honest Tea Talk, inshallah.
Where is the room now? Where do you have the bandwidth for anything besides survival?
Betrayal is something that can really break someone.
Regardless of whether it's a man or a woman, it doesn't matter.
And now she's also questioning herself.
Two human beings who have a relationship with each other based on mutual trust.
Yes, your salah will be impacted. Yes, your family life will be impacted. Yes, your work will be impacted. Everything.
I can never love again. I can never trust again. I can never XYZ.
Your reality, as you thought you knew it, is taken away.